There we go. Hey there, Team Healthy. How you doing? Okay, I've already noticed somebody's asking me how's Gus been doing lately. Some of you know that Gus has been struggling a little bit with some health issues. Actually, we found out through X-rays and all like that he's had some narrowing of the gap between C4 and C5 on his neck, and then between C5 and C6, and so he's been having some stiffness and all like that. And also, he's got a little swelling in his shoulder, in the some of the tendons, and also we're kind of dealing with some terrier issues and him jumping and all like that so much. And he's right 10 years old now, so it's starting to catch up with him. Thank you for asking about it. Gus is he's doing okay, and he's just getting like me. He's getting a little older and a little older, and it's starting to catch up with him. But we're doing okay. We're making good friends with his vet, that's for sure. Anyway, thanks for asking. Hey guys, you know that I really enjoy our time here on the midweek with Dr. C, where I get to answer the questions that you send in during the week. If you're new to our broadcast, you know here that you can put the questions in the comments section below. That's how I pick up on it. And it allows me to know who you are and what you're dealing with. And it allows me to talk about some of the particular circumstances that you're in ways that I might not be able to do so when I'm creating some of the broader videos that I do with some of the broader topics. So thanks for sending your questions in, and please continue to bring them in because we never have a lack of them, that's for sure. Now today, excuse me, we're going to be talking about when narcissists just absolutely seem to make no sense. One of the things I jokingly will say to people when they're trying to figure out what in the world is going on in the world of narcissism is, well, one of your biggest problems is you don't think like a narcissist. Because they bring their own type of reasoning, they bring their own type of relational style and mannerisms and all. And it's like, but this doesn't make any sense. And the narcissist is like, what makes sense to me is me. I want to do things the way I want. I think the way I think, and I manipulate people the way I do. And if you're going to hang out with me, you're going to have to get used to it. And as a result, it can create its own form of confusion when you're trying to figure out, well, what am I going to do when I think, well, I do make sense, and my sensibilities don't match up with that narcissist. That's what we're going to be looking at here through our question today. Now, the first question that I have here actually is being asked on behalf of an adult brother. And okay, we're just going to start immediately with an aside. Sometimes when you learn more and more about psychological insights and what we do here on the channel with narcissism, and keeping in mind that I'm talking so heavily about human nature in general, you can make some growth efforts, and then you see people that you care about and love in your own personal life, and you want them to be able to have that same advantage of being able to have the insight, and sometimes it doesn't happen. That's what this first question is about. This person says, I have a brother who's the sweetest guy on earth, yet he consistently chooses to spend time with people extremely high in narcissism. He entrusts his finances to him, red flag, goes on vacations with them, and has been married to one for decades. I've seen him side with them when they're on the rampage. How can this be when he's the kindest person I know? Around them, it seems that he turns off his feelings and becomes a mouse. He admitted to me that he's never in his life shared his true opinions with another human being. Okay, when you say he's been married for decades, I'm going to make the assumption. Let's say he's 50 or more. And here you have somebody that just keeps being run roughshod by these dominating and manipulative individuals. And this person's over there saying, I just feel so badly for my brother. It just makes no sense. Now, obviously, it would be a lot easier if I had the chance to sit down and talk with the brother. I don't have that advantage, but you might question, where's he coming from? Now, the first term that we often use when we think of someone like this is flying monkey. In other words, the flying monkeys can feel weak, so they attach themselves to the strong individuals, and they vicariously gain a certain amount of strength by saying, well, I'm on that person's team. And it sounds as though there's some of that going on. Another question, though, that I would have is, well, you say that he's the sweetest person you ever met. How do you know you're not being manipulated by him? And maybe he's got a lot of that narcissistic quality on the inside of himself, which is why he's attracted toward people who are renegades or just do things in their own separate way and they don't follow the standard protocols. We don't know that. What we do know is you're seeing something that makes you feel uncomfortable. And you've got a twofold challenge in front of you as you see this, because this is making no sense to you. The first challenge you have is to talk with your brother about your concerns. I think that's reasonable since he is your brother, and obviously you care about him, and I respect that. And so it may be if you haven't spoken about this before that you can let him know. I've noticed that when you're with this person, you seem to be really different, or you tend to backpedal whenever you're around someone like that, or they seem to be taking advantage of your good nature, and you don't want to pressure him too much because unless you want to sometimes run him off. But I don't think it's wrong to point out what you observe and let it be known that as your sibling, I'm concerned, I care about you, and I wish that better things could happen for you. Now, there's a good chance, based on what you're saying, that he'll go into this rationalization mode. But nonetheless, you want to let him know, well, I just know that I see it and I have my concerns. Then another thing that I would encourage as you are talking with him, particularly when he says he admitted to me that he's never in his life shared his true opinions with another human being. Go ahead and individualize that one and let him know. Well, the fact is, you just confided that in me, and I hope that that means something to you. I appreciate the fact that you're quite willing to even share that tidbit of information. Can you and I, at least between the two of us, have an understanding that if there's anything that you need to discuss or disclose or reveal, I'm your sibling. I'm very willing to tune into you. So know that if you would like, I'd like to be a safe person for you. Just know that's where I stand. And so you'll notice that the way I'm talking about this is in a non-controlling kind of style. Ultimately, you can't jump in and control how he prioritizes his friendships and his engagements with others. You can't ultimately even control how he responds to you. Make your observations, declare where you are in terms of your availability. And then what you don't want to do is just so take on the role of rescuer that you wind up going under. Now, this leads to another primary thing for you to consider, and that is, are you willing to accept the fact that maybe for whatever reason, your brother just simply doesn't feel the need to change? You'd like to think, particularly if he complains and says he doesn't like certain things, that he would. And then can you acknowledge this tells me that I'm limited? I'm limited in how far I can go in helping someone and in taking them down the road. Again, speaking personally as a therapist, that would be one of the things that I had to remind myself, because there would be times when I would see certain things in individuals. It's like I know I'm on target, and yet they didn't see what I saw. And even if I made comments or discuss things, sometimes they're just not at a readiness point. And then would remind myself, I'm a consultant, I'm not an implementer. And so I can consult with people, but I can't implement it. Ultimately, that's up to them. Can you allow yourself to be in that kind of position? So yeah, it's a delicate way of being open without being controlling, is where I'm going with that. All right, now this next one, and I'm kind of guessing that some of you are going to bristle on this because chances are you've experienced some of this yourself. My heart goes out to this one. This person says, is verbal and psychological abuse enough to leave a narcissist? My husband's voice volume, tone, and content literally feels like knives. My ears hurt and ring for hours and even days after he yells at me and the kids. I feel like I'm losing some hearing after this is happening over and over. My husband says he's not that bad, and I'm just too sensitive. Okay, so the original question is verbal and psychological abuse enough to leave a person in a marriage? Now, let's underscore, leaving a marriage is a big deal. And particularly, she mentions that she has kids, and so I understand. You hear people say, "Oh, I just go contact, just get them out of your life." Well, sometimes it doesn't always work that way, and I understand that. And so you have to be very judicious in terms of what the unintended consequences might be if you were to choose choice A versus choice B. I'm not going to say you can or can't, but if you ask, well, I think obviously that abuse is not just of a physical nature for it to rise to the level of abuse. Uh, when you're talking about his voice volume and tone and content feels like knives, that's extremely descriptive. And then when you say your ears hurt and he yells at you and the kids, I want you to think, what kind of human being feels like it's okay to say, I am going to so intimidate, I'm going to so humiliate and dehumanize that person in front of me? I refuse to acknowledge their legitimate needs for respect and honor, our dignity, respect, and civility. I refuse to accept any of that. I'm not going to acknowledge it unless I'm getting my way. Is that a relationship that you need to be in? Now, I can promise that most people would say, well, if it was a neighbor down the street or someone that I know in an organization and I don't have to be around them that much, I'm not going to spend time with that person. But with it being your spouse, does that person, as your spouse, have kind of an extra pass then to be able to be that way? And at some point, I'm hoping you can decide, I'm drawing my line here. There's a certain amount that, there's imperfection. And when you live with people, you're going to see one another's foibles and follies and all more strongly than you do with people in public. But there's a certain line that I can't allow that individual to cross. And when there's this repeated condescension and verbal abuse and psychological abuse, that's still traumatizing. And so do not minimize the fact that that's what is happening. Now, the thing that bothers me most is that some individuals, these narcissists, feel like you owe them your submission. And this can happen inside of marriages. It can happen in parenting. Even if you're an adult kid, you still owe me your submission. This can happen at work, in social settings. And when someone comes along and says, that's what I do, that's what I require, then at some point it's like, well, that may be your game, but that's not my game. And I'm hoping you can decide if it means that I'm going to be abused and I wind up being completely diminished as a regular human being, then I think it's fair to at least look at that, even though you have some strong, other elements to consider. I think abuse is abuse, and you need to call it what it is, and then make your decisions accordingly. And if someone else says, "Well, did he hit you?" and if the answer is no, then you can't do it. Well, you know what? No one knows what you've been through except you and those kids. And so make what makes the most sense to you. We're going to get to another question here in just a few minutes on that, some too. Okay, now you have another question here. Dr. C, do you think that people should give advice only when asked? Could you please elaborate on when and how to give advice when you want to support them without being narcissistic? And that's fair. Some of you may recall that I have this little mathematical, psychological math equation that says unsolicited advice equals criticism. Narcissists are very well known for giving you advice that you didn't exactly ask for. You need to do this and you should have done that. And so, in light of that, then the question is, well, is it ever okay to give advice that somebody didn't ask for? And there are times when, of course, yes, if you see something that seems bothersome, or perhaps you see a blind spot in another individual and you'd like to, in love, discuss that with them, there are times when it's reasonable to say, I'd like to talk with you about it. Now, the question is, how do you go about doing it? Now, you can do like the narcissist and you can just immediately start denigrating them. Do you realize how stupid you look right now? That's one option. Or you can say, I can't believe you're so dumb that you would talk to somebody this way, or you would let people run all over you. That's another way that you can do it. Or you can be more gracious than that, shall we say. Now, one of the things I like to do is a couple of different things. If I see something, let's call it a blind spot or something that somebody is not aware of that's creating as much of a problem as it actually is, I might say something like, may I make an observation? In other words, it's my way of saying I've got something to say, but I'd like for you to at least offer at least some sort of assent that says that you're willing to hear me. That's one approach that I take. Or another is I might be a little bit more direct and say something like, I'd like to share with you something that I'm noticing that I have a concern about. I hope that you would be willing to hear me because this is something that's bothering me on your behalf. And show yourself to be somebody who's not being overbearing or intrusive. You're not being demanding, but there are just times when, as a friend, as a fellow human being, you can speak up and say, I'm looking at this. This is something else for you to consider. I think that's very fair. Now, a question is, do you do that so much that you just can't stop yourself, and you overplay your cards there? And so, obviously, that's something you want to be careful of. Another question is, do you already have a reputation of being flexible and kind, and you're not manipulative? And so, the more you're of that nature, then you have that much more credibility. So, what we don't want to do is we don't want to just offer unsolicited advice over and over and on about nitpicky stuff or in an embarrassing kind of way or in a humiliating kind of way. But I do think that as you care and love care for and love another person, there are times when it's reasonable to sit down and say, "Hey, there's something I'd like to talk with you about." And notice my tone of voice. Remember, I think it was just this last Monday. I mentioned my covert way of picking up on narcissism. When I say covert, they don't see it, but I see it. Is when people go into high persuasion communication. You don't need to say you got some things you need to talk about. We got some stuff we got to get rid of here. When you get into that persuasive style, that doesn't work. But there are times when there can be a gentleness and a reasonableness as you share your cares and concerns, and I feel like that's okay. Okay, now you have another person here who's trying to make sense of where that narcissist is coming from, and so let's see if we can kind of do a back to the basics kind of a thing on this next question. This person says, have narcissists experienced as a child admitting they did something wrong and then got severely punished, which in turn perpetuates their own narcissistic behaviors? They adopt a belief that perceives being wrong is a threat to their own life. And in general, the answer is yes. One of the things that needs to happen in a kid's childhood is obviously we need to learn how to talk about our differences, or we need to talk about how we see things in ways that are not the same as one another, and we need to communicate that in such a way that's not shaming, it's not guilt inducing. It's just like, hey, I'd like to talk with you. Many times, though, children grow up thinking, well, if I'm wrong or if I make a mistake, oh man, the authority in my life is going to clobber me, and they can speak to me in a really harsh and mean no tone of voice, or they act as though that's my mistakes are the sum total of everything there is about me. And so there are plenty of times when that child knows that there's a grading system out there, and way too many times I don't make the grade with certain individuals. And my guess is that many of you who are listening to me will say, "Oh yeah, I've had those people in my life." And so there are times when we're authorities over children that we can speak in such a way that just kind of diminishes them. Or there are times when we can talk to kids in such a way that says, okay, there is a mistake that was made here, or there's something confusing here, or there's something that, well, we need to redirect. Let's look at that. And it can be done in a kind kind of way. I want to give you it's kind of a funny illustration about when I think I was first grade. I was really young. Let's say 5 or 6 years old. And the teacher in the class that I was in asked everybody in the class to draw a picture of something that's one of their favorite things that they liked. So just draw a picture of that. So what I did is I drew a picture, and I was real proud of it. And when the teacher came and was looking at my drawing, it was just kind of a plain brown mound there. And she looked and said, "Oh, so I see that you drew a picture of a mountain." And my response was, "Well, no, I didn't draw a picture of a mountain." She said, "Well, what is it?" I said, "Chocolate cake." Because I thought that's one of my favorite things. And I don't know that I'd really seen many mountains by that time in my life. She said, "Oh, chocolate cake." And I felt kind of embarrassed because it's like, well, I'm not that excellent of an artist, obviously. And so I thought I drew this brown thing and it looked like chocolate cake to me. And her comment was, there are times when we draw things and one person has something on their mind and somebody else has something else. I didn't realize that you were thinking about food. I was kind of thinking about nature and you were thinking about food. And so she just soothed it over really nicely. And I thought, oh, okay. So we just had a difference of perspective in that moment. And she was really kind in the way that she talked about it. Now, she could have said something like, "Well, if you think that looks like a chocolate cake, I got news for you. It doesn't. It looks like a mountain to me. You need to put some trees on that thing and just be done with it." She could have done that and shamed me, but she didn't. Unfortunately, though, many of us look back and instead of having that wonderful teacher that's kind and conciliatory, sometimes we do get those shame messages. And then what that does is it causes them to have this dread and fear. And before you know it, the kid that has been shamed winds up becoming the one who gives shame, and the cycle gets perpetuated. So that's a long way of answering that question. If you admit that something is wrong, or if something is obviously not a part of the norm, are people shamed? And the answer is, oh yeah, way too many times. Okay. All right, now here's another one. We were talking about that one about marital abuse. This is another one that I think we need to pay attention to that runs parallel to that. This person says, "I've been married to my husband for nearly 37 years. I'm still with him. I understand wanting to get off the merry-go-round, but how do I reconcile that with my marriage vows in sickness and in health until death do us part?" I ask this with such sincerity as we are going through yet again another really rough patch. So here you have somebody that says, 37 years, we got a trend going. It's ugly. I just consistently feel defeated and deflated, but I stood there in front of God and witnesses and the minister and who knows who else. And I said, till, better for worse until death do us part. And I meant it. And I don't want to make myself a liar this many years down the road. And frankly, that's something that we want to take seriously. Again, marriage is a serious commitment because it's part of our fabric of family, etc. And we have many other issues that are riding with the decisions that we make. Now, whenever I would talk with people who have this kind of mindset, I try to remind them, keep in mind that those marriage vows are a two-way street. And in essence, you're kind of speaking, if you will, a verbal contract with one another. I intend to be here with you and for you, love, cherish, honor. That's who I am. That's what I want to be. Did it ever dawn on you that even as you continue to honor your side of that equation, that the other person has already said, "Well, guess what? I've negated that contract. I'm not doing it." And so they have opted out of the agreement. They've opted out of the love, honor, and cherish. And you're over there saying, "Well, here I am. I'm willing to do it. That's how I define myself." Is it wrong for you to say, "Well, given the fact that I made a commitment, but you choose to not to uphold your side of that contract or that agreement, then sometimes you may have to say, that being the case, I get it." I'll give you an illustration. I knew of a guy who made an investment in some real estate, and it required him to periodically give money to the developer guy, and so he signed the contract, and he willingly would give him the money, and every quarter he'd send more money in. Only later did he find that the real estate developer was taking the money and putting it somewhere else that he wasn't that he was not contractually able to do. And so, in other words, he was a fraud. And so my guy is like, "Well, I committed to sending that money every quarter." It's like, well, he broke the contract. And having broke the contract, you're no longer obliged to keep on playing the role that you want to play. And it's something like that. If you have somebody that you have made a contract with, but then they reveal as time goes on that they're not committed to it. In fact, they're defrauding you, and it was a fake agreement on their part. At some point, it's reasonable for you to say, "I get it, and I need to make my decision separate," because that person has already chosen to walk away from the commitment. And so to me, I'm not mincing, playing games with truth and all like that, but there are times when that becomes the case and you need to make your decisions accordingly. Okay. How about this next one? Okay. I wanted to include this one because this person speaks on behalf of a whole bunch of you out there, I'm sure. Have you ever gotten mad at that narcissist and you have previously sworn off saying, I am not going to let that person get to me ever again. I'm just going to be my own separate person. If you ever have thought that and yet you kind of slipped, okay, that's what this next question is. This person says, I ignored countless emails filled with hate and venom. But recently I reacted to an email with an equally hateful message. I'm disgusted for having lowered myself to her level. I had stuck to my DNE, do not engage method for so long. I don't know why I let her trigger me. How do I get over the disappointment that I have in myself for reacting that way? Okay. Okay, so here's this person that says, I've got this narcissist in my life. It's an ex. I don't know if it's a marriage or a dating relationship or business. I'm not sure. They didn't specify. But after you pulled away, that person just keeps sending these venomous emails. And it's like, I'm not going to respond. I'm just going to leave it alone. Gray rock, no contact, all like that. Okay, you're doing good. You're smoothing. You're sailing smoothly. But you look at one of those emails and it's like, there it comes again. When is this person ever going to stop? And so you sit down and you write a scathing response, and then you hit the send button, and then it's like, ooh, I don't know if I should have done that. And sure enough, it doesn't come out very, very pretty. That person can come back and talk about how hateful of a person you are, and you think, I blew it. Now, you may have gone 38 times where you didn't blow it, but then in that one time, it's like, that was not my finest hour. So, how do you get over the disappointment that you have in yourself? Okay, two things. Number one, would you please just let yourself be human? Okay, I like to think that I've got confidence and all of that, but if I kept getting messages over and over and over, where finally I just say, "Stop it, quit it. I hate it when you do this," and then that other person does the gotcha game. I gotcha. Look at how you dysregulated you are. Then I know that every one of us, given the right set of circumstances, can be susceptible to that. So allow yourself to be human and just think, okay, lesson learned. I have to go back to the basics and remind myself why I had to do the pulling back that I did in the first place. That's the first thought. The second thing is, it may be that you'll need to take your no contact a little bit more full in the way that you implement it. And by that, I mean, you're reading those emails. And it may be that you'll need to just decide, whenever I see that person sending me an email on my computer right here, I've got this button right there that says delete. And it may be that it's just like, I'm just going to have to delete. I'm not even going to look at it because history has told me that it's not going to work out. And you may think, well, yeah, but what if it's important news that I need to respond to? Well, if it's that important, you're going to find out from other resources. And so at some point, it may be that you'll just need to decide, I can't even afford to go that far to even read their venom, much less to talk with them about it. And so it may be that that'll be a lesson that says I need to strengthen my sense of boundaries. So consider those possibilities. But the main thing is, if you have some good intentions and then you slip, you're human, okay, and allow it to be, even as you continue your forward movement. Keep in mind, they're good at what they do. They can sometimes be relentless, and they absolutely love it when you show yourself to be flawed. But you know what? There's 8 billion of us now on this earth, and all 8 billion of us, including that narcissist, including you, including me, we're all flawed. And so I'm not going to be blown away when it shows up. Okay, allow it to be there even as you continue to grow. Okay, this next one, all right, similar nature, but We're going to use a little gallows humor here, but let's not carry it too far. Next person asked the question: how do we stop hoping that they get hit by a bus? Oh, not killed, but just getting over the idea that they should feel the pain that we felt. Getting over the resentment of walking away from feeling disadvantage of, being taken advantage of. Okay. Again, we go back and say, well, I remember this is quite a number of years ago. I was talking to a friend. We had lunch, and he was telling me that he just absolutely hated his life at home with his wife, and he just leaned in and said, "There are times when I don't think I can do this anymore." And I asked him the question. I said, "Do you ever just sometimes fantasize about her dying?" And he just kind of looked at me like, "How'd you know?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I know that those kind of thoughts can cross your mind." And then I looked at him and then I said, "Do you ever think about the insurance money?" And then he looked at me big eyed and was kind of like, "Busted. How did you know?" And he kind of had a laugh because and I knew him well enough that I could talk with him that way. Unfortunately, there are times when you have such a feeling of misery, and you've got that person that's in your life that creates so much strain that those kind of thoughts are going to run through your mind. Now, obviously, I don't think that you need to do anything to act upon it. I don't think they need to be, filled with bitterness and hate because, it's the old saying, bitterness is you drinking poison, hoping it kills the other person. It doesn't work. One of the things I tell people is if you're experiencing bitterness and you want to get rid of it, here's a cure, and the cure is give yourself 100% total permission to have as much bitterness and hate as you want, and just hold to it as long as you like. And people will look at me like, Dr. C, have you lost your mind? Are you crazy? Well, what I'm saying is keep in mind that you have choices. And if you want to hold on to your bitterness, if you want to hold on to your hate, remind yourself that's an option. You can do that. Now, when we look at it that way, it's like, well, that's a really rotten option. And my response is, I'm glad you arrived at that conclusion rather quickly, I might add. What other options do we have? And so when you see that holding on to your hate, holding on to your bitterness, hoping that person gets run over by a bus, you can do that, but it doesn't help you, and it makes you more and more like the very person that you have the anger toward. And this is where guys like me go to the comment or go to the concept that we refer to as radical acceptance. And when we say acceptance, you accept the fact that there's a loose end in your life, there's a difficulty that is not going to be different. You accept that, and when we put the word radical on it, what we mean there is it just feels so exaggerated, though. I mean, what I'm looking at is just so ugly, and it just shouldn't even come close to being this bad, and yet there it is. And so there are times when you have to ask yourself, well, what does my truth tell me? And sometimes truth says, I'm dealing with somebody who is absurdly um, insecure, impossible, difficult, not likable. And I need to accept the fact that no matter what I say or do or don't do is not going to change that. And I need to come to terms with that as truth, and then move on my merry way somewhere else, knowing that that person is going to be a purveyor of hurt and pain to a lot of other individuals. And one of the ways that I can stay connected to that person who gives that is I can hate them. And I don't want to stay connected to anyone via hate and via resentment. And so, resentment, hate, yeah, it's an option. But in my book, it's a really rotten option. What are the others? And to me, it starts with you developing a sense of radical acceptance so that you can move on and claim what you know is your better version of yourself. That's a hard one, and I know many people don't like to confess what this person confessed about. I just wish they'd get run over by a bus. But when you find yourself being at that place, then the question is, what am I going to do with me and my emotions? What are the options? Put them all out there, and then select the one, hopefully, that rises up with DRC, what we stand for here on Team Healthy. Okay, this next one, and this next one just screams gaslighting. This person writes in and says, "My husband accuses me of being needy. He said that after I expressed disappointment that he seemed disinterested in most of the things that I do. So here she's having a discussion with her husband, and it's like, I've talked with you about A, B, and C, and I just don't get the sense that you really care that much about who I am and what I've got going on. I mean, I can hear that conversation happening in so many different living rooms, and apparently the husband looks at that and says, "You're just needy." Well, it would be nice if the husband could say, "Well, I can tell you're feeling pretty strongly about that. I'd like to know more about that." And then with empathy, it would be like, "Well, as you spell it out, is there something that I need to know differently, or how can you and I be better coordinated?" You would like to think that that person could take your comment and say, "Well, let's turn this into a constructive dialogue." Narcissists can't do that. They don't make sense in the way that they manage life. And so you're over there saying, "Well, I'm trying to pour my heart out to you, and I'm trying to explain to you that we really do need to do things a little bit differently around here." And the only thing he can come up with is, "Well, let's turn this into a referendum about you. If you have needs, by the way, it's okay to have needs. Then you're needy, and then that has the connotation of you just being a sniveling, inadequate person. Go away, get out of here, and don't bother me." You don't have to be clingy, you don't have to be demanding, but it's okay for you to say, "Yeah, I've got needs, and part of the reason I'm in a relationship is, we hope that we can mutually help each other with our having our needs met." That's okay. And so don't take that as something that's wrong to say you have needs. But in the context of what he was saying, consider the source. And then as you remind yourself, I think I'm fair minded. I think I'm objective. I think I'm helpful, and all the rest. He's making a poor choice of words. That's gaslighting. That's him wanting you to doubt yourself. I'm hoping that you can have confidence that says, as a general rule, most of the time, I really am committed to my growth, and I'm not going to let him take away my comfort that comes from knowing that about myself. Now, the next one, I did a recent video on self-loathing, the narcissist who has self-loathing, and they show it in so many different ways. This person asked the question, can a self-loathing narcissist try to make you self-loathing? My mother did everything in her power to make me hate myself, and she tried to even make me homeless. She stole everything that had emotional value to me. So, does a self loathing narcissist try to make you feel self loathing? The answer is yes, 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 yes. Major yes. They try to put you into that self loathing position because that's how they think. Um, for me to be able to share encouragement with you, I have to have a certain amount of self encouragement. But when I put hate on you, what it illustrates is that's what I carry on the inside. So when you have this mother who willfully treats her adult daughter in this loathing way, with the idea that says, I want you to take responsibility for all the misery that you and I experience. What she's doing is she's drawing upon her own personal experience. And I use the analogy: if I have a bill here in the United States, I'm going to pay for it in dollars. Well, why? Well, because that's what my bank account has. If I was in Europe and I live there, then I'd pay you in euros. I pay you based on what my account has in it. Psychologically, it's the same thing. If I pay you with a lot of hate and venom, it's because that's what's inside my psychological bank account. And so she has this self loathing. That's the currency she operates with. And so she's engaging with you. It's like, let me share with you what I carry on the inside of my own account. That's what's going on. So the answer is yes, 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 1,000 times yes. It's projection, by the way. All right, let's do one more question here. This person says, I was staying with the narcissist as he was close to death, and I heard him say, please don't let my kids hate me. I truly believe that he was talking to God and repenting for his selfishness and control of us. He was a strong Catholic man. Okay, strong Catholic man. Um, In what sense? I mean, maybe he showed up at church, but if he treats people in a hateful kind of way, to me, that's not very religious. So you have the going through the motions, but then you have the character issues where I'm going with that. You know what my reaction to that is? At first, okay, I'm glad that the guy's on his deathbed. I'm glad at least that he's trying to make some peace with some of the stuff that he's done that's been very wrong, apparently, and very hateful. To me, this is an illustration of that person's psychological laziness. Now, I'm not going to kick the guy all the way while he's about to make his exit from this earth. But it's like, well, let's say he's 85 years old. You had 85 years to figure this out. And in the last 2 weeks of your life, you're going to say, okay, I guess y'all were right after all. I mean, I'm glad that you see that, but now that you're too old and decrepit and not able to do much about it, and it's like, well, it doesn't really have a whole lot of consolation, but at least it has some. And so I'm going to acknowledge that. Okay, thank you. And it's okay to say it doesn't diminish the pain that you had. I'm going to receive it, but I'm not going to just go jumping for joy. I'm hoping that, and again, I hope you don't take it as I'm just going to kick that guy all the way until they start throwing dirt on him, because I don't feel like we need to be that way or that severe. But it does illustrate, you could have done something a whole lot sooner. I'm guessing is confronted plenty of times, but I'm hoping you can make peace with your maker. Good for you. Now, in the process, I'm hoping you can decide, I don't want to wait until my dying day or my last, 2 weeks on earth before I start making peace with people that I may have offended. I want to make sure that my whole life I'm going to be open and willing to receive input and didactic. When I say didactic, there's a give and take in the relationship that we have. You share with me, I share with you. Refers to half. Your half and my half. We're going to go with each other. And I'm hoping you can decide. I want to make sure that while I can still do something really substantial about it, if I have made mistakes, I'm willing to make recompense, and I'm going to do it in a timetable that allows it to have some roots to it. So just take that as motivation. Be glad that he at least sees it, but then I'm hoping you can think I'm going to use that as a motivator that says I think I can do a little bit better than that. Okay, yeah, we're gonna wrap here with the idea. Keep in mind that narcissists, they don't think like you and me. Sometimes they want to make you out to be the bad guy. You're the one that doesn't know what you're talking about. I'm hoping that there's going to be a mindset in you that says, as I observe this within the life of the narcissist, rather than taking the shame or the anger and the guilt that they want to throw onto me and then running with it in the wrong direction, I'm going to see some of the difficulties they bring with the attitude that says, this is why I want to be the better alternative. And you'll notice that that's a theme that I've had since day one, since I've been on the internet. I don't want to just criticize and say, they're all a bunch of idiots. Sometimes they are. But I want to say, if this is something that's creating so much difficulty, then the last thing I want to do is to be on that team. I want to ask, what are my better alternatives? And I'm hoping you're dedicated to being the kind of person that says, I want to go in a better direction, which is why I refer to us here as Team Healthy. What's my healthy alternative? I want to be committed to that. And my observations of the negativity make me that much more determined to be the better alternative. All right, guys, keep sending those questions in. I really appreciate hearing from you. So many of you, as you send these questions in, are speaking on behalf of many others. And so it's good for others to know that they're not alone. So share your thoughts. And we're going to pick up on this again, same time, same station next week. I know that many of you are watching on tape delayed, and I'm glad that you're able to get in. If you can watch us live, that's great, because we've got a good group here that's in the chat room here. But just know that I appreciate you letting me be on your journey with you. I hope you have a good rest of the week, and I will see you next time. Bye.